it's easy to do good and it's easy to do the right thing, but not necessarily for everyone. And when people for whom it's difficult find a way or are led to that path, or for whatever reason are fortunate enough to understand the joy that is doing the right thing and then get to do it, I almost want to live in those shoes for that 10 seconds. So that's got to feel amazing. To suddenly realize, like, I am capable of goodness too.
Demystifying the mystical and celebrating the ordinary moments of grace in our lives. This is Ordinary Grace. I'm Matt Guerrero. Welcome to the conversation. This week, we talk with Logan Crow, Executive Director of the Frida Cinema, an art house movie theater in Santa Ana, California, about the power of film and the particular genius of director David Lynch. In this episode, the first half of a two-part conversation, Logan joins me and producer Sean Woodard via Skype to talk about seeing Blue Velvet at 11 years old, the quiet spiritual grandeur of the color purple, and the unexpected theological depth of Robocop. You've said in the past that you dedicated your life to film. Why film? What age did it grab you, and why does it have such a hold on you?
That's interesting. 5 is the answer to
Right.
What age it grabbed me. And I always look back to the movie Arthur with Dudley Moore, Liza Minnelli from 1980. I believe 1980. My mother took me to see it, and growing up, my parents, my father was young. He married at 19, so he was very much a kid. He's very much a young man when he was starting this family, and was into film. So he would take me to movies. Mom would take me to movies. Mom was more into culture at large, opera, music, literature, film. And the distinction I think between the two is that Mom was very much into, I guess, more cerebral, arty, international films, and Dad was more into just sort of populist entertainment. And so I got sort of the both from
Sure.
them. We would see Arthur one week and Amadeus another, and I remember with Arthur wanting to go to New York and being really, really transported, and the music, the Burt Bacharach score of Arthur, really just striking a chord with me in a really, really, really deep level that, when you're little, you don't, it's just, I responded,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? It was just what swept me was this experience of going to a movie and disappearing into it. If I were to try to psychoanalyze it, I think coupled with the fact that my parents married very young, moreover, for my mom, my dad was born in Ecuador, but he came out to the States when he was 7. My mother was born in Nicaragua. She came out at 24. So this was not her country for the longest time. And there was a lot of chaos, I think, and just dysfunction in the household at an early age, which I totally understand now, looking back at how young they were and how new this world was to them. And it certainly wasn't my mom's plan to leave Nicaragua, but she got married and ended up here. So I think movies also offered escapism from that. I think that movies were where I could go for a couple of hours and tune out, a lot of the friction and frustration that was happening at home between my parents, and just go to another world and just go and dive into something. And again, I don't think that I ever consciously saw it that way as a kid, but looking back, it just totally makes sense to me. And so I would seek them out. And VHS, when VHS happened, I remember the first tape we rented was Dreamscape. And it was this big deal that we could watch, Dreamscape at will at home. We'd seen it at the theaters, and we went to one of the first video stores, and Dad's like, "Oh, I remember this one. I remember this moment vividly. Like, oh yeah, I like that movie. Let's watch that." And then it became VHS, just watching movies over and over at home, and I would watch movies that I loved over and over and over again till I could memorize them and talk about them. So that was just always my first and biggest and deepest passion was film. I sometimes say that film was my first sexuality. Film was my first orientation. Like film came first before anything. And if I'm one of those guys that if you look at my high school yearbook, half of the little notes that people write say, see you at the movies or good luck in Hollywood and all this stuff, because it's all I ever talked about. So yeah, it was just always very, very personal to me. I think that the sort of explosion into art films and, more surrealist and cerebral films came with Blue Velvet. My parents took me to see Blue Velvet when I was 11.
Wow.
Yes, not knowing what they were quite taking
of course,
me to, I don't think. I was a huge fan of the Elephant Man. So the Elephant Man, back in the day, the first cable was on TV. And Select TV, and it was like a box, and you would switch between on TV and Select TV, and that was basically it. And they would play like the same movies over and over. Blue Thunder every day, Helicopter, Roy Scheider, and then The Elephant Man was on, and Xanadu, and just these very specific films that they would like over, Grease 2, over and over and over again. And but The Elephant Man really haunted me. It really, really just impacted me. I would watch it. I would seek it out. I would draw The Elephant Man in school because I found it so sad. And I think the sadness of it was exhilarating. I don't know how else to put it. And then I saw Dune and really enjoyed it. And so when I heard that the director who made The Elephant Man and Dune had a new movie coming out, I begged my parents to go see it. They did not do their research. And we saw Blue Velvet, and I honestly think it just rocked my little brain. I honestly think it flipped a switch. I became really obsessed with it. It was one of my earliest depictions of sexuality that on screen that I saw on the big screen, for one, right around where puberty was about to hit. But also it was just loud. It was funny. It was scary. It was different. It was haunting. It played like smoke. I don't know, like smoke and fire. I don't know how else to put it. It was just something magical about that particular dark piece of cinema. And I just, that's David Lynch became a hero and still is. But I think that it made me want to seek out more films like it, whatever that meant. And thus, I just started diving into obscure and odd and plus Blue Velvet we saw at an art house in Hermosa Beach called Bijou, which I didn't know at the time what defined the Bijou versus other theaters, but because I saw it there, I decided I wanted to watch every film that played there. And as it happens, those were your divas and your For All My Concubines and the pianos, your art films. And so, I was able to watch a lot of those films, and Texas Chainsaw Massacre too, and all these movies that, midnight movies as well. And just I just got really, really into it. That's still me. That's what I love.
It's kind of an overwhelming experience to watch something that young. Do you remember at 11, what in your experience of Blue Velvet, as you thought of it again and again and again, and maybe you were able to see it or maybe not, I don't know, how many times, because now, you can rewatch a movie whenever you want. And at the time it was kind of different. It would kind of exist in your brain in a different way than I think it does now, maybe for kids. What was the element that kept replaying?
Dennis Hopper, Frank, Dennis Hopper. I would sit and wait until Dennis Hopper comes through that door and sort of, shut up, where's my bourbon? Whatever once he was on screen, it was like everything up to his moment was like the going up the incline on the roller coaster. There's still plenty to take in. You're kind of looking around, you're feeling the exhilaration, and Dennis Hopper walking through that door is that first drop. Like, to me, that's where the movie starts. But honestly, I think that there's something about, there's a moment in the film where Dennis Hopper, where Kyle MacLachlan's character, Jeffrey Beaumont's leaving Dorothy's apartment, and Frank is already standing in the corner with his entourage. And they had the little exchange about neighbor, what's your name, neighbor? That whole thing. And then they go on the joyride. They go to Ben's place that Dean Stockwell plays. Ben sings Roy Orbison Into the Light. And then they go out into the field and Frank puts on a lipstick and beats up Jeffrey. From the moment that Jeffrey steps out into that hallway and sees Frank to the moment where he blanks out from being beat up, there's something about that stretch of film that to me is still, that's my favorite stretch of film in any film ever. Like just the car ride, the switchblade in the back seat, just the shots, the sort of rockabilly music that's playing on the car ride, getting to Ben's, Heineken, fuck that shit, Pabst Blue Ribbon, into Ben's, the doll, the mannequin that's on the couch in the back, that's just so Fellini, and then Ben singing into that light, which I'm going to get that tattoo. I've gone to 2 different artists and I still haven't found quite the right, but him singing into that light, I think, is just probably my favorite moment in cinema. And Frank watching and having his own weird mini orgasm, whatever's happening with Frank.
Yeah.
Just the admiration and the humility that this monstrous, explosive character seems to have for just this one man, and the mystery of that. David Lynch is big on mystery, and I love that about that, because I used to always want to know, why is Frank humbled by Ben? Why is he more soft-spoken with him? He smiles at him. He requests him to serenade him. And the thing is, we don't know. That's a mystery. I like to think it's because he admires that Ben is also a violent. He's got he runs a brothel, it's implied. He punches Jeffrey in the stomach. I mean, he's a violent thug, but he's graceful and refined and contained, and he's not pure id. And I think maybe that's what Frank admires about him, is that he wants to be able to have that. Who knows, right? But I love the mystery of their relationship.
And everyone has their own answer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I love the mystery of their relationship. And then you go out and you've got the scene over by the oil derricks, whatever it is, where you got the lady dancing on the car and Frank putting on lipstick and delivering his incredible monologue about Love Letter Straight from My Heart, referencing the song that's playing. It's just all of it that's happening, or the song that plays later, I should say. It's just a fantastic, fantastic stretch of cinema. And I just loved it. I loved it. It was almost cartoonish to me, I think, as a kid, because everyone is a little bit turned to 11. Dorothy's turned to 11. Frank, stop it! Just scream everything. This woman dancing on the car. It's hilarious to watch in the middle of this.
Right.
You don't know if the guy's about to get beat to death. For all intents and purposes, he's a dead man. And Frank even says, you're fucking lucky to be alive. Like he is. And again, the mystery, why does he get to live? It's like all these things. I just, and Frank looking at him in the car and saying, you're like me. There's just all these things that just, I love to watch that scene over and over and just look at how lines are delivered, what the lines, the letter of the lines, what the dynamics are between these people. What does Frank see in Ben that makes him worship him? What does Frank see in Jeffrey that makes him spare him and put on lipstick and kiss him?
Yeah.
All these really, really interesting things that I love, and it's funny because I love David Lynch. I would love to know his reasons. I would love to know.
Do you think Lynch knows his reasons? That's a serious question. I mean, he uses so many images from transcendental meditation and dreams. Do you think he has a full understanding of why his subconscious gave him that image?
Here's the thing. I don't know. But what I do know is that his answer for why he doesn't explain does make sense to me, which is it's less about what another artist might say, which is I want the person to get their own interpretation. I want the viewer to get their own answer, and that's what it's all about, which is fair. He goes a little bit deeper. His thing is, when you solve the mystery, the mystery dies. The moment becomes finite, and when you don't solve the mystery, it's eternal. It lives forever because it's got no end, because the questions keep it alive. And I appreciate that, because that, I think, is part of what I love about watching his films, is that I can just watch everything from a purely sort of surrealist, expressionist, or whatever you want to call it, level, and have fun with where my mind goes with it, and what is my takeaway this time, And I think that if he did have answers, if he did have, conclusions, he now has me fearing, that might go away. That level of mystery might go away. And then I'm looking at it. Oh, okay. So all that stuff I led to it was different. Okay.
Right.
Well, I would still like to think my ways. No, I guess they're not. I guess my ways aren't valid now that I know. You know what I mean? So
Right.
I dig that he doesn't explain. I don't know. That's a really good question. I bet you for some things, yes. And for most things, no.
Yeah.
Because he talks about ideas too. The ideas come from the ether. He fishes them, put them in the freezer, whatever. Like, they're images, they're moments, and he puts them in his films. And so I think a lot of it is, like you say, without sort of a meat, not meat, but without that sort of explanation. I think they are dreams, like he has said. We can try to interpret our dreams, but our dreams are never going to tell you, yes, that's correct.
Right.
But I also think that narratively, like, Mulholland Drive, perfect example, or Lost Highway. I do think that narratively there's something very concrete going on. That he has not answered. But like, with Mulholland Drive, I think maybe shortly after I watched it the first time, I'm like, oh, and then it made sense to me. And then when the DVD finally came out, he put those 10 questions. I don't know if you remember that. Like,
I do.
Here's 10 questions to solving Mulholland Drive. And I'm like, okay, that just basically validates exactly what I and a lot of people I
think that's why it was one of his more popular films, and got the Oscar nomination, I believe, because it does communicate more on a more direct narrative level once you figure it out, once you get it.
Exactly.
And it's not as hard a puzzle to unlock as some of his other films. Like Inland Empire, I don't know what the fuck is going on in Inland Empire. To this day, I have no idea.
No, I agree. I think Mulholland Drive, I tell you, like, there is a very straight narrative to that film. It is just not told chronologically, and it does not all take place in quote unquote reality.
Right.
But I've told people, like, if you start it here, that is where the real starts, and everything behind it was a reinterpretation of the real. It is the occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge. It's Lost Highway, but not as purposefully sort of I don't know, esoteric, I guess. I don't know, but yeah, no, I agree with you.
So to pivot more to spiritual matters, what films reach you on a spiritual level? Talk about that moment in Blue Velvet where he's watching Dean Stockwell sing, and there's a very transcendent quality to the way the light hits his face that you were talking about, and maybe that's part of what your reaches you when you watch that. What other moments have you had with film like that?
There's a moment at the end of The Color Purple where that always just I don't know, just fills with this emotion, just pours into me every time, and it's just a shot. It's I'm not sure how familiar you are with the film, but it's okay. So at the end, the Mr. Character has he's been a horrible person the whole movie. And you get this insight, throughout the film that he was also abused by his father, and that he's very intimidated by his father. And so at the end, he does the right thing. Danny Glover brings Celi's family from Africa to finally reunite with her. And, it's an emotional moment, and they're out there, and they're hugging and they're talking. And this movie's already full of emotional moments when the sisters are separated, when Celi helps Sophia shop at the market and tells her to keep her chin up. I mean, all these moments. But they show Danny Glover, Mr. out in the field, and he's just kind of watching, and he's got a smile on his face. And then they cut to Shug. They cut to Shug Avery's character, and she turns and notices him in the field. She's watching him watch Celi reunite with her family, and they cut back to Shug, and that incredible Quincy Jones music just swells up, and she's got a look on her face, and I'm crying right now thinking about it. Like, I cry every time, because it's just this look that says, there's my man. There is Albert. Like there's the Albert I've always seen and known, that no one else saw and known, that I would try to tell Seeley, he's a good man. I love him for, because Seeley could never quite understand what was, and I think Seeley loved Albert too, in her own way. I mean, there's little moments where you can see their connection, but that look on Suge's face of just pride, like she's so proud of him, and she's so aware that like this is something he's always been capable of, and here it is, just gets me every time. I think maybe because that speaks to my own feeling that everyone is just inches away from redemption and doing the right thing. It's a choice. And I wish I knew what it took. I'm a big proponent of self-help, reading, therapy, whatever it takes. I mean, I think that the human condition is it's a very difficult thing. We're always consistently conscious of the fact that, we are fatal, that we're going to die. We don't know how, the people around us, the people we love, are going to lose, or they're going to lose us. And I mean, it's a fundamentally inherent difficult thing to be alive and to need and to be hungry and to have people around you that you don't want harm to come to, and all of it. And I think that unfortunately, some people go very primal with that and inhuman in ways, and then some people dedicate themselves to humanity. But I don't think that people that don't are a lost cause.
Right.
They've been misled. They are listening to the wrong leaders who are basically convincing them that they have their back, because and a million different reasons why people go askew, and you've got this story. I mean, it's very much Seeley's story, but I love Albert's character. I love that we get to see his dynamic with his father. I love that we get a little backstory as to why he's such a jerk, and at the end of the movie, he chooses to do the right thing. And that just means the world to me. That reminds me of another movie, Do the Right Thing, by Spike Lee.
Yeah.
Pretty much any interactions between mother, sister, and the mayor get me in the heart.
Yeah.
They get me in the heart. Anything between Ossie Davis and Ruby Dee, especially knowing, that they were a real life couple, and all of their years of activism and everything. Their sort of dynamic gets me in the heart every time. There's a lot of
their very presence in the movie with how important they were to the civil rights struggle
absolutely
is towering.
So that is always very, I mean, I love that movie as a whole, but their interactions are always just so beautiful, and the jazz music that plays when they see each other, and just all of it. Her screaming no in the street at the end devastates me. God, other scenes in movies. This is gonna sound silly, but the last line of Robocop,
which is refresh me on Robocop.
Murphy. So at the end of Robocop, Robocop saves the day, and he's leaving after he shoots the bad guy, and the head of Omni says, "That was nice shooting, son. What's your name?" And he turns, and it's the first smile you see on him as Robocop. It's kind of a half smile, and he says, "Murphy." And then the credits, just the theme song hits, and the credits just immediately start. I love that moment of self-redemption, of reclaiming yourself. For those of you who don't know the story, he was a police officer named Murphy who's gunned down, and then this horrible corporation turns him into, it's a Frankenstein story, really, turns him into this machine that is, has I think it was something like, his face and, lose the arm was a big line. I think it's like barely any part of him left except his brain and his face, and they've wiped his memory. But as the film is progressing, he's having these little flashes of memory, and he's starting to remember himself. And at the end, just to proclaim that is my name, that always gets me. It's a silly little thing, but again, that goes back to why I love Paul Verhoeven. I love Paul Verhoeven as a filmmaker as well. Down to Showgirls, he's great, a great satirist. I think an underrated satirist for our times. But
I was just thinking about Robocop, and there's a great scene, like right when he's in the final confrontation with Clarence Bodiger, that they kind of interpret as Robocop walking on water. Kind of like this.
Yeah.
Robocop as this Christ-like figure.
Yeah.
And yeah, I guess there's a few other like.
Well, certainly it's a resurrection metaphor
Cops,
from the
cops
start.
Being cynical about him, like, oh, they're treating him like he walks on water. But you're right. There's a double. I never thought about that. There's a double meaning to that. You're right. Yeah, that he's kind of a Christ-like figure. Another one right now that just came to me is a movie called The Mission.
Mm-hmm.
The Robert De Niro plays a man who's just lost himself. He has been poaching indigenous people from Ecuador and South America and sending them off to slavery. It takes place in the past. And then he, commits this horrible murder. And between those two things, he's just lost. He's a lost man. And Jeremy Irons comes, he's a priest, to try to redeem him by having him join their mission in the middle of the rainforest. And as penance, and Robert De Niro needs to tie these giant rocks to himself, these weights, while he makes his journey up into the mountains. And there's this long sequence of everyone climbing, and he's climbing, and he's got these rocks, and he feels like he deserves it, and he finally makes it to the top, and all of the natives come running out with their weapons, and it's a look on his face is like, and here's where I die. You know what I mean? Like, I've been killing all these people. They recognize me. I'm a dead man now. And they surround him, and they start cutting off the rocks, and they start cutting through the ropes, and he just breaks down in tears. And then he has this like laughter tear fest where he's just laughing because he's so released and crying at the same time. Chills every time. I'm getting chills right now. I don't know. That's weird. I just realized there's a really underlying theme of redemption right now.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Well, is that a reflection of your own
I don't know.
personal
That's
spirituality?
That's odd.
And did you pick that up from the world, or did you pick that up from film? Because there are so many film redemption character arcs, do you now personally believe in respond to redemption arcs, or did you pick that up in another tradition?
To redemption arcs. I just think it's interesting that I never considered how important they are in cinema, and how those are the moments that break me down. Although I think about that's not universally true. I cry at the end of Tears of Endearment. Amadeus. There's a lot of movies that devastate me, but Tony Stark. But no, as a kid, I think that was that's interesting. It's just seeing people have their humanity restored to themselves, or even in stories where you hear about, I will read about, former white supremacists who are now working with at-risk children in the inner city, things like that, or lecturing about the banality of racism. And stories like that I really respond to. I read those. I get so inspired and swept up by that, because I think it's easy to do good, and it's easy to do the right thing, but not necessarily for everyone. And when people for whom it's difficult find a way or are led to that path, or for whatever reason are fortunate enough to understand the joy that is doing the right thing and then get to do it, I almost want to live in those shoes for that 10 seconds. Because that's got to feel amazing. To suddenly realize, like, I am capable of goodness too.
Well, and understanding that feeling is not possible without all the years of suffering and being something totally different before. And that's the difficult part of it. You can't get that release of redemption without the struggling of failing yourself time and time
I was
again.
probably the only 8-year-old in the theater that was bawling my eyes out when Anakin Skywalker had Luke take his mask off so he could look at him with his own eyes.
Oh, yeah.
Good.
No, you weren't.
I'm glad to hear that.
Because that was right there.
So devastated by that in the best way. Just like, I just love that moment. you know, and I don't know if I'd seen it now, having seen Anakin's youth now, if it would have been any more or less impactful. But
You know what's interesting? And if we're going off on a brief Star Wars tangent, I apologize. This is one thing that legitimately bothers me about the changes that George Lucas made to the special editions. When you see Sebastian Shaw at the end of Return of the Jedi, it says everyone can be redeemed. When you see Hayden Christensen, it says a different.
Not only that, Hayden Christensen did not redeem himself. That age of Anakin was a bastard. You know, and you know, why didn't we see Ewan McGregor then instead of Alec Guinness at the end? If we're only showing the young, it made me mad. It made me very angry as well. It was silly.
It just seems to change the entire thesis of the original trilogy.
I agree.
And that bums
me out. I had been Obi-Wan Kenobi in that moment, I would have turned and been like, "Why do you get to be young again?"
Right.
To be young again. You know, I would not have. Hello there. I would have been upset. And Yoda too. Yoda. Who knows what Yoda looked like as a kid? He looked like baby Yoda, I guess. I don't know.
I guess.
Like he's old bones. Like, but yeah, no. I that was great. No, Paris, Texas. I mean, there's a bunch of movies that just like, you know, and I love movies too where there's a movie called Paris, you know, well, there's a movie called Paris, Texas. Paris, Texas, Me and You and Everyone We Know. Certain movies where I'm just kind of glowing from beginning to end too. Like other movies where, for whatever reason, because of and I'll say this, one thing I've really noticed, and actually my sister was the first one really to point it out when I was younger, and it's really true. The sound and music of a movie are really huge to me. You know, one of my favorite movies is The Cook, the Thief, His Wife, and Her Lover. And the score of that film, the Michael Nyman score, is such a huge part of what makes that movie what it is. And the piano, same, you know, Michael Nyman again, like, and for a while I was a huge Michael Nyman fanatic, you know. But, you know, movies like that, where they're more, I guess, aesthetic minded nature, music, cinematography, costumes, and the narrative is there, but it's really about playing with form. So The Cook, the Thief, Wife, and Lover comes to mind. Those movies really affect me. Me and You and Everyone We Know, which is this very light movie with kind of really mature and dark elements, but this music that just fits the mood of it so perfectly. You know, I do love movies that are more, I guess sort of aesthetically minded, but sort of made like an auteur film, but that sort of strike a chord of whimsy, I guess. I'm a sucker for whimsy. I love when whimsy and the darker elements intertwine. Like I really, really love that. Pan's Labyrinth, you know, movies that are, magical but dark at the same time. You know, and I think me and Everyone We Know, when I say dark, I don't mean it's, you know, there's something quote unquote dark about it, but there's mature elements to it. There's sexuality to it. There's, you know, these weird little dynamics that happen throughout the film, but the whole film at the same time feels very whimsical and light. And I think that's how life works is, you know, you can have a life that's sort of charmed and full of magic. And I think life is very full of magic. But bad things happen in life at the same time. And one, I think, has to decide for themselves, is existence a horrible dark thing where great things can happen, or great and wonderful and magical things where fucked up things can happen? You know,
where do you land?
And that's honestly, it's a personal choice. I think people can reset that for themselves. Not that it's something you just snap your finger and it happens overnight, but it does take some focus. But I think that we can rewire, we can reframe, and re-examine the way we look at things.
Next week, we'll continue our conversation with Logan as we delve into his own experience of spirituality and the central role that therapy played in his personal evolution. Ordinary Grace is a conversation about the spiritual and religious life. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and rate on iTunes. Every rating and review helps another seeker find their way to us. And if you would like to join the conversation yourself, email us at ordinarygracepodcast@gmail.com or find us on Twitter at podcastgrace. Our theme music is by the band Silent Partner. The show is produced by Sean Woodard. Thank you for listening, and may you be happy, may you be safe, may you be healthy, may you be free.